we're at 94% is my estimation. Okay. And I'd like to thank everybody very much for pointing out during the coffee break that I today am literally being paid to watch a clock. It's great work if you can get it. All right, so what we're going to do now is that this is an opportunity, of course, for questions to come out of the audience from all of you and the people with public engagement. We're really busy during the break, pulling them all together and putting some questions together. So, Katie, I'm going to turn things over to you. And away we go. And there's no timer. There's a timer here. So I'll kind of just ask of the questions and of the answers just to be mindful that we actually have a lot of questions turn in. So in your answers, if you could keep them to, minute and a half, couple of minutes, that'd be really appreciated. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Bettina, and it's so wonderful to be here today for the question and answer session. I found the conversation earlier really fascinating, and the diversity of the sector is tremendous. As Bettina mentioned, my name is Katie Norman. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister who has the pleasure of serving with the Public Engagement and Planning Division of Executive Council, and I had an opportunity to work with community partners in the development of the work plan. So it's fabulous to be here, see so many people here today celebrating the sector and celebrating the work that we've done to date and the work that is to come. So the cards today have a dual purpose, one to help facilitate the session, but it also gives us a good sense of the pulse in the room in terms of the kinds of questions that we then as a working committee can take away and can work on. So thank you for collecting your thoughts and sharing them with us. We've heard from more than 30 individuals, and there was a couple of key themes that kind of came out, which is where I want to kick off the morning. We heard about volunteerism. There were a lot of questions on social issues regarding poverty reduction, food insecurity, mental health and addictions, and accessibility in our communities. We heard about the need for sustainable funding and capacity building and how we can strengthen partnerships across the sector, but also with community and private partners. So as I mentioned, we will try to get to as many as possible. And we've started with the four big themes that we heard, where at least 3 or 4 people asked each of these questions in a different way. So the first is around multi-year funding. A couple of panelists spoke to that. So we'd like to hear from government on your plans regarding multi-year funding for community partners and initiatives to reduce red tape. What are your priorities moving forward in these 2 areas, Premier Ball?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And I will say that Katie and the staff have done a fabulous job in working with the community sector in hosting this event, so thank you very much. She's just not just an ADM, by the way. Yeah, multi-year funding. If I could go back, and I will try and keep this brief, but back about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, there was one thing that was loud and clear as we went around the province, is that people were looking for some certainty. The big theme, the message that came to me back then was that, I can't get staff. Every year, staff is working on a contract, and you could lose a very valuable employee next year simply because I can't guarantee the fact that the money's going to be there to support them. So that's where it all started. Then it was around administration costs and so on. And I understood the difficulty of not knowing that, come the end of the year, there'd be no money waiting on the government program. So one of the things that we've done, we've identified, I think there's some 3,600 incorporated organizations around our province, just to put that into magnitude of where we are, and then there's many others that are not incorporated. So we started down this process of $115 million that we had. How do we then get so many groups into multi-year funding? So we picked 22 to start with, because there's a fair amount of assessment that would need to be done to make sure we guarantee the transparency and the accountability. We just can't write checks for 2 and 3 years' time and not knowing that there's an accountability mechanism, because it is taxpayers' money that we're dealing with. The AG doesn't like when we pre-commit funds beyond the budget year as well. So there's all those things that we had to consider. So there's currently an analysis that's being done on the 22 that we have to make sure that we're getting the goals and the objectives. So that's that in terms of multi-year funding. But there's other things that we could actually do to make sure that that certainty is in place, making sure that we turn the programs around faster. I mentioned in my opening remarks they were able to do that with the industry sector, getting tenders out early and so on, and getting to the point once the budget is released, even on an annual basis, we get to the decision sooner. So there's a number of things, but multi-year funding, I know, it's a big part of this discussion. We've had a lot of success, I believe, with the 22 that we have, and it is our goal to expand that. We will not, though, however, use up the full 115 funding envelope, because we want to allow for the flexibility of associations that will start up that we haven't even thought of yet, the new things and new ideas that will come from the community. So leaving some money available for other groups that we don't even know who they are yet will take on new initiatives and new activities. So we need to leave some room for those innovation, new ideas to come and to be supported by government as well.
Thank you, Premier Ball. And now we have a question that has both government and community elements. There were a number of individuals who spoke to the important role that the community sector plays in delivering mental health and addiction services throughout Newfoundland and Labrador. So how can we strengthen those partnerships between both the provincial government and community agencies?
I'll just jump into that, and before I turn it over to some of my colleagues. I don't mind saying this, and I say that this became very personal to me. All of us in this room can speak to a family member, and I won't get into all of this, but I spent 33 years in a community pharmacist, and I saw lots of examples where people's lives were not fully, they had not reached the meaningful lives that they rightfully deserved simply because they were struggling with mental health, and they did it in the shadows. They were afraid to come out on more than one Friday night, Saturday night. I would find myself back as a community pharmacist almost as a gateway to the healthcare and really talking people through some very challenging times. And it wasn't just young people, it was seniors as well that were living alone. So when I got involved in politics, I will tell you, I really wanted to make sure that if I did everything by the time my timeline in politics was over, that I had an impact on mental health within Newfoundland and Labrador. And I can tell you, I wasn't afraid to chat about it. I talked about it at some of the big business rooms that we went into. We made a difference with the new accord that we did with the federal government, making sure that message stayed out there. Towards Recovery, led by this gentleman right here, and a lot of community groups, we've been able to reduce wait lists considerably in Newfoundland and Labrador. That was all done with collaboration within our communities. And John, I'm going to turn it over to you for a brief comment. And by the way, we are replacing the Waterford.
Thanks, Premier. We're 2 years into a 5-year plan from Towards Recovery, 54 recommendations, 36 done. The rest are on schedule or ahead of timeline. But what does that mean? Well, it means, as the Premier says, we have 68% fewer people waiting for counselling. We've started at the front end. We put doorways clinics out in over 50 communities, low barrier, walk-in, single session, and at least 50% of the people who go there find that their problems are managed. We have put addictions hubs out there, but the real piece about the community sector is around the lived experience piece. We're only the second province in the country that has a recovery council. What's that? It's a group of people with lived experience who report directly to the minister. They're the feedback loop to say, well, this is working or that doesn't. We have rolled out some initiatives, we have others, but the community sector fills a gap that we cannot even begin to occupy. You put a health logo on things and people react to that because of the stigma they feel. And I've said in many other areas, you know, that stigma generates silence, and with mental health and addictions, silence is lethal. It kills people. And we've seen that, unfortunately, in a variety of communities. So the answer is we take one step at a time. Channel, for example, we've expanded their services. They are people with lived experience who provide direct counselling, not just to St. John's anymore. So I'm looking to ideas like that. So if there's any of you out there that have a bright idea we haven't thought of, bring it on. I'm in the phone book.
Thank you, Minister. We had a number of questions also related to accessibility and the shifting demographics in the province. So my question is, and I think this one might fit for Minister Dempster, how do we make our communities more accessible, and what does government plan to do in this regard?
Thank you, Katie. Well, when we talk about accessibility and how do we get to where we need to be, and I have some members of my board, Provincial Advisory Board here today, thank you for coming, it seems daunting. But you take it down into bite-sized chunks. And I guess it was back a few months ago we launched consultation sessions around the province on accessibility. We were very pleased with the uptake. You know, normally when folks register for those forums, you get less out, but consistently right across the province, we had higher numbers out than actually registered. So where we are right now, my mandate letter from the Premier, when I went into the department, he asked me to review the existing accessibility legislation in the province. So we've done the consultation piece now, and staff here in the disability shop and with our executive team is currently sifting through what we heard, and we are going to be moving forward. But you know, we talk about, my colleague Minister Hagee often around the table talks about the low-hanging fruit. And so we're having these conversations everywhere we go, making life more accessible for people. It's not always about the bigger things. You know, after we have a snowstorm and we're moving into winter season, and often you see businesses that will shovel the steps first. If you shovel the ramp first, everybody can go in by the ramp. So it's these little things and keeping the conversation going. And so that engagement process have wrapped up now, and but we'll be moving forward, so stay tuned for more, and thank you for everybody who's had input into that process.
Thank you, Minister Dempster. A number of the organizations this morning spoke about social enterprise either as their organization's primary focus or a way that they've diversified their operations to bring in new revenue. When not-for-profit organizations are starting social enterprise activities, have any of the organizations present today found challenges with accessing the required human resources skill sets amongst their employees in order to get those operations up and moving? Sean?
So Avalon Employment, we have a social enterprise. We do payroll for Eastern Health individuals who have disabilities. We're having some challenges finding people who have that understanding of how to take a risk. And if you're trying to expand, so as an example, last year Avalon Employment did $1.9 million in payroll for Eastern Health. We did a couple of $1 million for a bunch of other not-for-profits. But I'm having real challenges on how do I grow that and get somebody in to see the value. Because as an organization, we live in Newfoundland, but I can do payroll in the Caledon. So there is an opportunity.
Well, I think, Sean, if I could, just to jump in, when you look at one of the pillars that you guys have done a great job of putting together with this sector action plan, is one of the things is about celebrating the successes and making the awareness, you know, to the public. So there's a perfect example of great work that you're doing, and in order to build on that, you need to let people out there know that you can actually do it. So that is what this is all about, and hopefully we can get to the point when we gather and have future summits, we can actually even have more great ideas that you've been able to build on.
Colleen knows a lot about social enterprise.
Well, yeah, we do social enterprise, and we actually think outside the box too. Some of our employees live in Nova Scotia and Halifax, so we don't have that and living in our community anymore, right? Depends on what they're doing.
I can speak to that as well. As I spoke about our Mi'kmaq Experience Park and the powwow earlier, that of course is a social enterprise. And as I was telling the Premier earlier, we have an issue just with core budget just to make our operations from the 4 departments that we run. Social enterprises off to the side is another thing. So we're still having issue with core funding just to run our management and keep nobody in our band office gets a full salary all year round, and it's very difficult. So then as you were saying, we end up losing employees that are skilled, that know what they're doing. You're always in kindergarten because you're training someone else again. So so for me to develop social enterprise, that's on me. So I'm already working 100 hours a week and not getting paid for it. So this is just a core budget alone could go so much further for those organizations who are still struggling with core budgets for multi-year.
Well, and I'd just like to add to that, because I think it's really important that we have different revenue streams as charities. I came from the charity side. I think it's really important to have those different revenue streams, and anything we can do as a government in my department or any of the departments on the stage here, we're going to try to do it, because we see it as an opportunity to develop the economy, but more importantly to employ people doing some pretty unique things that are making a difference in the people of our province and around the world. So, you know, I hope every charity thinks about looking at social enterprise as an opportunity and look at those options to come forward, and we'll see if we can support you in any way we can.
Caroline?
So from an HR perspective, it's very interesting. And when I hire, I need skills, but I also hire first and foremost for the values. So if the person's values line up with what Smart Ice is doing, is that me? If the values line up and the skills are there off to the side, then I know there's a better chance that that employee will line up with what we're doing and stay and then create it. I'm in a very unique situation where I was the first employee November 1st, 2017, and I've had to build my team, so I've had the beautiful opportunity of hand-picking people because the values line up and that it makes sense for those people individually. So from an HR perspective, that's worked what's best for me and for the organization. And I can tell you that everybody I hired did not know what a social enterprise was. Nobody. And then when I walked them through the organization and toured them through in a totally different way than sitting down and go, what's your skill set? You know, what's this, what's that? So I don't really do those types of interviews. It made sense, and you can see people's reactions. You know, we are co-housed with Choices for Youth in their social enterprise hub. It's a challenging environment sometimes, and they got to be comfortable with that. So from an HR perspective, line up the values first, and then it should roll out so that you've got people that it makes sense to them personally. And then so far, my turnover is like 0.
So in the action plan, you'll see near the end of it, you'll notice that there is a part there that's designated to human resources and professional development. Some of the $2.5 million that I had mentioned earlier would go to work with the community sector to actually help train people, through social enterprise and through their associations. Also making sure that people in the K-12 system recognize that that there is a job there, and there's a very viable job that we can actually make an impact on the province. So these are a couple of things that you'll see that's embedded right into the sector plan that you have produced with timelines attached to it, so that we're all accountable, government and the community sector group as well.
So the Community Sector Council has been partnering with the government on a 5-year HR plan, as the Premier just talked about. And these are opportunities, and the Community Sector Council, Penny, has seen where working with nonprofits, working with community groups, working with social enterprises, that HR is a big issue. It is a big gap, and it's about making sure that you have the resources and the succession planning and going forward to grow. There are also other supports within various departments to help organizations like yours expand across boundaries. So this is why we created a social enterprise action plan. And one of the avenues where we see the community sector and social enterprise growing in our province, Memorial University is one of the first universities to have an MBA in social entrepreneurship, and we have a social enterprise center. So we are seeing positive things happening around social enterprise and creating that level of awareness. But obviously there are certain challenges that we must continue. But we have to keep having these conversations in order to solve some of these problems that exist.
So one of the tangible assets that we have access to is the Canada Job Grant, which is through Minister Bernie's department. No, Mr. Moore's department at this point. Sorry, it flip-flopped on me. It's a really great tool, and I would recommend that you have a look at that Canada Job Grant, because I have invested in note the word, invested in the employees, because I want them there long term, because I don't want to go to kindergarten every 6 months, right? So reach out. It's a fabulous program.
I think it's as the ministers were saying about the programs and grants available. I just wanted to mention language. As we move forward, we're trying to rebrand ourselves as well, and giving a grant to the community group when it's really an investment. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but when we're out there in the community doing the work and partnering, we want to feel that we're not the poor cousin who always has their hand out for $20. We are doing the best we can with what we have, and we're inventive, we're innovative, but it would really make a difference if when you gave somebody a partnership, you said, this is an investment in our community versus this is a grant to an organization. You wouldn't do it to a fish farm, you wouldn't do it to a milk processor, so we would just ask for the same thing.
So building on that great exchange, thank you everyone for contributing so fully. There were some questions about the mechanics. So how do we move forward as a group? There's a lot of momentum in the room today. There's an action plan that was released last April that's going to require all of us coming to the same table and working together. So I'm interested to hear from a variety of people on the stage about how you would like to see this process moving forward. How's this going to work practically for everybody in the room?
So back in 2016, when we launched The Way Forward, it was really then a really deep dive into all areas of the province where we saw strategic assets. Could have been the Northern Peninsula, could have been the Burin Peninsula, could have been Central Newfoundland, Labrador, or in Labrador as an example. So we've had some success with this, but we needed to anchor it to something. And so what we did is we anchored this to a Cabinet Committee on Jobs. So it's about growth and sustainability for Newfoundland and Labrador. It's the only committee, except for Cabinet, in government that I chair. So that's the importance of The Way Forward, that document is to me. And it's working, by the way. We're seeing jobs created all around this province. And as been mentioned already by a number of people, no other province has really looked at community sector councils as an opportunity for growth and sustainability for their provinces. But 16,000 people doing the work that government would normally have to do if folks in this room weren't available. That is why, we're looking for the synergies and what we're looking for. And we often use the word efficiencies, which means really to a lot of people, well, you're just looking for a way to do it with less money. But what we're trying to do is use the money and the resources that we have to provide better outcomes and better services to people in our province. So we've anchored that to the Cabinet Committee on Jobs, and we have all the job creators inside of government working very closely with those public sector, with the community sector, but also with other industries as well. If there's anything that came out of this loud and clear with this engagement that we've had, is that it's the community sector council and associations that are tightly knit and woven into the very fabric of even the industries, even the private sector in our province. They rely on the work that you're doing as well. So it's all about partnerships, it's all about collaboration, but it's got to be meaningful partnerships and meaningful collaboration. And that, by the way, works both ways. So that's what we're committed to do.
I'd like to respond to some of that too. You have did great work and we are moving forward, but how do we get everybody in this room and make one policy don't fit us all? We're so diverse. Some are into, at social programs, some are into economic development, some are into tourism destination development. So I think that even in the work that we're doing, we have to look at the diversity and write policy that is a little bit more flexible, that you can respond to my need as well as you can respond to the other lady's need on the other side, because we're all doing something totally different and living in a totally different reality. So
there's no question there has to be flexibility. Yeah. And as I said, all of that works. If you're not talking to people, yeah, if you're not finding a reason to come together in a room like this here, well, you'll never truly listen to each other, because what might seem as a barrier to you, Colleen, in your area, might have already been dealt with by someone like Sean. So it's really not always, the government that will have all the solutions, and often the solutions lies within your own group yourself. And I've seen that working in healthcare over the years. And before I finish, I know we're getting a little over time, but I really got to say this before I finish. This is a comment that I made to Libby. One of the pillars of what we're doing, trying to grow our population, Newfoundland, Labrador, is immigration. And we've seen significant growth within the last couple of years. And but as I go around the province, there's still people that, make comments about, well, you're taking a job from Newfoundland and Labradorian. It's not about taking a job, because we will always make sure that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, people that live here, if the jobs and the skills are available, well, they will get hired. But from time to time, in order to make sure the skill mixes are available to us, we will bring people in. But here's one thing I want to say. I've been really, essentially, 10 years as an MHA. In terms of immigration, I've never had to deal once in my life with a file where someone from outside our province, who wasn't born here, needed the help of government. They have come in, they've created a job, they've added diversity to our culture, they've added the lived experience that they've had, and you know what? They've added to the fabric of Newfoundland and Labrador, and I think that there is one opportunity that we have collectively as a province to make sure we continue to bring people in from outside to add to the great place that Newfoundland and Labrador is to live.
come over here. Hey, thank you. So this is an official yoo-hoo. Okay. So our time for the panel has come to a close, and we're approaching the lunch hour. Penny, I understand that you're going to have some closing remarks, and then the Premier as well. And no offense to either of you, but Tim, if we could have 5 minutes on the clock. That's just as a tool, because I know neither of you want to be responsible for keeping people from their lunch, right? Okay. Thank you, Tim, very much. Penny, do you need this?
Just letting everybody know they're welcome to stay for lunch.
Oh, absolutely. Do you need this mic, or are you headed to the podium?
But I think the Premier was going to go first.
All righty. Well,
Your mic?
I think my mic's working, but I won't be long, and I've done a lot of talking today, and I think I'll even put that aside. Is that I mentioned about 2016, about the way forward as we brought together from growth and sustainability. I'm not going to go over all the challenges that we had to deal with as a province. You know, it's been 4 years. This plan that we put in place, as already been mentioned, is indeed working. And right now, I'm not sure. This may not be. This could very well be the last sector work plan that we put in place. There's others that are very interested. And I think there's still some opportunities that we need to actually bring groups together. It could be innovation, as an example. And Sarah mentioned this. We can do a little better job with that. But what I want to say is that for all of us collectively as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, that we've got work to do. The work doesn't end and stop with just having this meeting. When we leave here today, we've got to be able to go make sure that you work with your local MHAs, regardless of who they are. Work with local MHAs, work with government officials. What I will make the commitment to do is that we are there. We do not have endless supplies of money. Everybody knows that. But what we have are endless supplies of ideas. And that's the thing that are very tangible, that we can actually make a difference when we all work together collectively as a province. So the message will be loud and clear from us. I'll continue to lead and chair the Cabinet Committee on Jobs, because it is about job creation, it is about sustainability, it is about providing better services for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, regardless of where they live in our province. So the message for me is, my concluding remarks will be simply, thank you very much for what you've done already, and thank you very much for what I know you're going to do in the future. I think the untapped resources that we have in this room, in many cases, just filling the gaps of services that the private sector just can't do like you can do, filling them gaps that not even the government can do in areas. So all I'm saying is, let's continue to work together. I really appreciate this opportunity. Penny, you've shown remarkable leadership with your group in help facilitating this, and we can send a message to the rest of the country that you can do it in Newfoundland and Labrador. Well, what is wrong with that? Thank you very much.
So I want to start by thanking all the panelists. What an incredible job you all did. I was just amazed when I was out at coffee how people said it was so great to hear from so many different people, and what a great job you did bringing the work you do into a focus in 3 minutes. It just goes to show that if we work hard, we can really make things happen and have many more voices at the table. So thank you all. And to the Premier and Minister Haggie and Parliamentary Secretary Studley and Minister Dempster and Minister Mitchellmore and Minister Davis, thank you all for spending the morning with us. We certainly hope you'll come and join us for lunch. This was just amazing to have you all here today. I also want to thank Katie Norman and her team, who played such a wonderful role in pulling this event together today and making this concept work so well. Thank you very much, Katie, and to all of your crew. And now my 30 seconds of closing remarks. I hope you've all been observing the big screen in the middle of the stage, which talks about working together and accelerating growth. Some of you may not have caught on to that circle in the middle, which is a gauge, which is helping us accelerate growth moving forward. When we come back here in a year or two, I'm hoping that needle is going to be much further down on that circle, and that we will have seen that we've actually had some significant acceleration and growth and working together in the community sector. So thank you all. Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful questions. I think we've got them all accumulated. Maybe we'll try to get other answers at some point, but they'll certainly get into some sort of a report, I hope, as we're concluding this event. Let me just tell you, we have lunch now, and we have a couple of very brief speakers, and then you'll go into workshops. If you flip the card in your name tag, you're going to have to turn it over. There's an agenda in the back there, and you can see the workshops we're having, and you can see where they're located. And we're hoping that you'll all stay, because one of the things we learned during our consultations is that people really wanted an opportunity to advance and build their skills. So this is a bit of a chance for you to do some of that. So thank you all.